Clouds of smoke have continued to rise over the West Bank city of Jenin on Tuesday as Israel's operation has moved into a second day after residents of the city's refugee camp were forced to flee on Monday night. Now, the operation, which the army says was aimed at destroying infrastructure and weapons of militant groups in this camp, was launched with a drone strike in the early hours of Monday, and it continued all day with hundreds of troops. Now, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the death toll in Jenin amounts to 10, with around 100 wounded. While Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the country's military operations in Jenin for as long as required to restore calm and security to the people of Israel, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has suspended contact and security coordination with Israel.
In recent months, Jenin has become a haven for terrorism. We are putting an end to that. Our forces entered Jenin into the terrorist nest. They are eliminating terrorists. They are arresting wanted persons. They are destroying headquarters and seizing many weapons. And they are doing one more thing. They are destroying laboratories that are at an almost industrial scale, labs from which explosives were dispatched. Explosive devices designed to kill and murder Israeli civilians. We will continue with this operation as long as required to restore calm and security to the people of Israel. There will be a suspension of all meetings and calls with the Israeli side. We will suspend the security coordination with Israel. In the light of the Israeli non-compliance of the Sharm el-Sheikh understandings, the leadership announces that these understandings no longer have any value and cease to exist.
UN aid agencies have voiced an alarm at the scale of the ongoing operation in the West Bank town of Jenin and said there were restrictions on medical access as well.
So we are alarmed at the scale of air and ground operations that are taking place in Jenin and continuing today in the West Bank, and especially on airstrikes hitting a densely populated refugee camp. This is the second operation in Jenin involving airstrike within 2 weeks. Assessments are ongoing, and as I said, operations are continuing, but as of this morning, the Palestinian Ministry of Health confirmed the deaths of 10 Palestinians, including 3 children. At least 100 others have been injured, of whom 20 are reportedly in critical conditions. The airstrike also significantly damaged structures in which people were living, both in the camp and in surrounding areas. Due to damage to infrastructure, most of the Jenin camp is currently without drinking water, and the first initial estimation indicate that most of the camp is also without electricity. Health facilities have also reportedly sustained damage, and health partners are reviewing a list of urgently needed supplies and have already provided some supplies using stockpiles.
Israeli forces say an offensive targeting militants in the city of Jenin could last days, one of the biggest West Bank operations carried out in 20 years. Residents of the adjoining refugee camp were seen fleeing violence on Monday. That included gun battles with militant fighters, as well as drone strikes that Palestinian authorities say killed a number of people. The densely populated camp has existed since 1948 in the aftermath of a war that accompanied the creation of Israel. Now, Israel claims it's a hotbed for the Jenin Brigade's militant group and has moved hundreds of soldiers in and carried out days of strikes. This woman says that Israeli soldiers stood near an ambulance as locals were told to leave their homes and their possessions before being brought to the hospital. Footage released by Israeli police claimed to show arrests made as part of the operation, blurring faces to protect identities. For more than a year, army raids in cities such as Jenin have become routine. There have also been a series of deadly attacks by Palestinians against Israelis and rampages by Jewish settler mobs against Palestinian villages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday vowed to continue the operation for as long as necessary, calling Jenin a, quote, nest for terrorism.
In recent months, Jenin has become a safe haven for terrorists. From that safe haven, terrorists perpetrated savage attacks murdering Israeli civilians.
Body cam footage from the Israeli army claimed to show a gun battle from the operation. Its apparent scale underlined the importance of the Jenin camp in violence that has further exposed the impotence of the Palestinian Authority, especially over towns in the West Bank, where it holds nominal governance powers. On Monday, the Palestinian Authority said it was cutting off contact with the Israelis.
There will be a suspension of all meetings and calls with the Israeli side, and we are suspending security coordination as well.
The Palestinian Authority has also called for help from the international community. The United Nations has said it's talking with all parties to de-escalate and ensure humanitarian access.
Senior Israeli journalist Amichai Stein joins me live right now with more inputs. Thank you, Amichai, for joining in. Let's talk about the car ramming attack that took place in Tel Aviv today. It's already been labeled as a terror attack. Why so? And how is Israel preparing to handle further escalation to other fronts?
So it is a terror attack according to the Israeli police. And what's more devastating, that Palestinian terrorists who conducted this terror attack got a special permission, a special health permission to go into Israel and used it to ram people in the middle of Tel Aviv, and afterwards went out of the car and started stabbing them. So he had a special health permission to come to treatment in Israel, and he used it to conduct this terror attack. This is a really devastating story and devastating terror attack. And at this point, we're talking about 7 people that were injured, 3 of them in serious condition. Now, this would happen today in central Tel Aviv, and police saying without any doubt this was a terror attack.
All right, Amichai, attacks have been reported on healthcare. Ambulances have been denied access, something that the WHO has already raised concerns about. What has been the impact of Israel's air and ground operations in the West Bank at the moment?
So Israel is conducting a very surgical operation right now in Jenin. It's not a massive operation like the Palestinians are trying to, let's say, describe it. It's a very surgical operation. Even the drone strikes or the fighter jet strikes are very surgical. At this point, we're talking, I think, about 10 terrorists that were killed. And mainly the search is after these explosive labs, which allow Jenin to be such a safe haven for terrorists in recent months and years. You know, this is a city that about 60 terrorists went out from this city to conduct terror attacks against Israelis. So at least these terror organizations felt in Jenin as a safe haven. And now Israel says, we are going in, we're doing a surgical operation. We are not going after, of course, civilians. And we're really trying to go after these explosive labs and terrorists to find these people. Now, we heard earlier today Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think, hinting that this operation is coming to a close. But he also said this won't be the last operation of its kind.
It's interesting, Amichai, that you mentioned that Jenin has been becoming a safe haven for terrorists. But I want to delve deeper into that aspect, because we are talking about a large military operation, something that's been the biggest in the West Bank in 20 years. Why has Israel chosen to conduct a military operation of this scale in Jenin?
Again, we're talking, of course, like you said, of the biggest operation in 20 years, but it's not a big operation like the operation 20 years ago.
Like the second Intifada.
It's a surgical operation. We're seeing much more troops going in. We're seeing much more airstrikes on terror targets, but it's not a huge operation. Even in Israel, let me tell you, they're not calling it an operation. They're calling it some kind of counterterrorism op against terror. Meaning, in Israel, when you have big operations, they usually have names. This time, they don't have names. So Israel messages it's not the big operations like in the past. But, you know, after 60 terrorists went out of the city and conducted terror attacks against Israelis, you know, Israeli government felt it enough. We need to stop, first of all, Jenin becoming a safe haven. B, we need to again, we need to find these explosive labs and terrorists and arrest them. We're talking about several hundred being arrested in this operation. And I think that the goal of the operation is not only the operation, what it's getting at right now, meaning the explosive and the rest, but it sends a message to these terrorists. Listen, guys, if you think you can be safe over there, it's not like that. And we will come next time or in a week
All
or
right.
two and come and haunt you. So the message is really to explain to the terrorist, you can't hide inside
All
Jenin
right,
anymore.
Amichai, let's talk about the message. Let's also delve deeper, because it seems what Israel is doing is in sharp conflict with what the UN has to say. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that such a military operation in the West Bank could end any possibility of a political resolution, and that an expansion of Israeli communities represents a violation of international law. What explains Israel's disregard for the UN, even the ICJ ruling?
First of all, I suggest the UN to condemn all these terror attacks against Israelis and really, say that the Palestinian Authority is inciting violence and paying terrorists. The main problem is that the Palestinian Authority isn't doing its work. Israel gave the Palestinian Authority weapons and things like that to find these terrorists, okay? And they're not doing it. They're not doing the job. So at the end, it comes up to Israel to go into these cities and do the job. So everyone can come to Israel and say, why are you going in? But at the end, it's because the PA is not doing what they're supposed to do. And when they are not doing what they are supposed to do, so Israel is doing their job. By the way, politically, you can say it's good for the Palestinian Authority because these terrorists and Jenin are in opposition to the PA. So it looks like Israel is doing the job. So in Ramallah, they won't say it, but they're very happy that Israel is doing this kind of job.